on to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Hi, good everyone. It's Phil Tarrant here. I'm the host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Thanks for joining us today. As I mentioned, if you've been tuning in over the last couple of days or weeks, we're smack bang in the middle of summer. A lot of people on holidays. Hopefully you're not working. Hopefully you listen to this on the beach somewhere. That's where I plan to be spending some time over the Christmas period. But a bit of a theme that's come through the last few podcasts around what's happening in 2018, and you hear a little bit more of it, of different sentiments and observations around property markets across Australia and where people see the opportunities are, both investors but also a lot of experts as well who do that sort of stuff for a living. Our guest today is a property investor, and as you know, and if you tune into the Smart Property Investment Show regularly, it's about storytelling with property investors, and we do get the occasional property experts. So these are the heads of franchise groups or data houses or property buyers, buyers agents. But by and large, we like listening and hearing stories from investors, and it's something we can all learn from, myself included. And you know, I've said it beforehand, I get one of the best apprenticeships in property in Australia, getting the opportunity to speak to property investors and experts from all walks of life. So today, Lachlan Williams is in the studio. Lachlan's going to have a chat about how he went from 0 to 4 properties in less than a year. Lachlan, how are you going?
Very good, thanks, Phil.
So why'd you go from 0 to 4 properties in less than a year? What happened?
I've been trying to catch up, is
Okay.
the short answer to that question. I sort of been thinking about investing in property for a little while, but procrastinated and spoke to a few people and thought about it, but got a bit lazy, and then I finally bit the bullet this year and pulled some equity out of the home and just went as hard as I could, as fast as I could.
So what was the sort of watershed moment where you went, that's it, I've got to start doing something? Is it really clear, or is it something that just bubbled away over time?
Yeah, there was. Look, there were a few of them. I met a few colleagues at work that were into property investment, and they'd talk about, you know, they've got this many properties, and it seemed almost impossible to believe that they'd done so well so quickly. And I had a guy speak to me and give me a bit of a rundown on how to do it, how to do the research yourself, where to go and get the data and all of that sort of thing. And I started to do that, but too hard. And then I met some guys who were working with Right Property Group as buyers agents, and they sort of talked me through the strategy. And it just clicked. I thought, this just makes sense, and I can do this. I can pull some money out of the home, get some equity, and bang, away we go.
So by catch-up, do you feel as though you should have invested in property when you were younger?
Absolutely.
Or, yeah.
Well, there's two parts to that. So I've actually been a property investor about 20 years ago for a very brief period of time. So I had enough money to buy a unit when I was in my 20s, bought the unit, moved into it soon after that, and that gave me a bit of a head start in life. I sold the unit, got a townhouse, sold the townhouse, bought a house, kind of following the path of having a family, having kids, following that path. But before you know it, 20 odd years have gone by and I haven't invested in property. So I thought, it's time to do it. My super's not going to get me by when I retire. So
There you go.
now or never.
So this is a wealth creation retirement
Absolutely.
play for you?
Yeah.
Okay. So how old are you? So you're
I'm
40-something, right?
Yeah, 47.
47. Okay. What sort of work do you do?
I work in one of the major banks in IT.
Okay, cool. So I imagine you get a reasonable salary. And stuff,
Salary's
right?
not too bad, yeah.
So this is a wealth creation strategy. So at a point in time when you choose not to work, and you know, I don't know when that is, so it's a different time for different people, but you know, the government wants us to work longer, so you know, we'll be up into our 70s. I hope to be working when I'm 70, but choose to work. This is a play about providing you with an income, so you're not relying solely on your superannuation.
Exactly.
To have a nice lifestyle.
Passive income and hopefully I've sort of picked a number. I've said, you know, by the time I'm 60, I'd like to be earning roughly the same sort of salary that I'm earning now, maybe more. And that was the thing I liked about the strategy that I got with the Right Property Group. It starts with that, and you work backwards from there, and you have a investment strategy that sort of follows that path, and we'll see how we go.
Just for our listeners, if you don't know about who I use as a buyer's agent, it's Right Property Group as well, so that's interesting. There you go. Full disclosure, that's why I like the role. Look, they're good operators, and I do a podcast with you work with Victor, do you? Yeah. With Victor Kumar and Steve Waters, called Investing Insights with the Right Property Group. So it's where we really dig down into a lot of the sort of more complex and complicated factors of property investment. Unlike the Smart Property Investment Show, we just talk to investors about investing in property. But anyway, I digress. So for you to replace your income at 60, so you've got 15 years or so to work, how large, or what's the value of your property portfolio with no debt in it? Do you know what that needs to be in order to give you the number that you need?
Yeah, I think it's in the order of 12 to 15 properties, and those properties I'm talking 300K type property. So it's more about the value of the portfolio.
Yeah.
Rough calculation says that it's, roughly between 10 and 15 mil of property value by then. And there's not a lot of time to do that. I think a lot of people, when they're starting out with that sort of a strategy, they might have 20, 25 years in which to do that.
Market cycles,
So I've got a real challenge ahead of me to try and get all the debt down from those properties in that short amount of time. And of course, that coupled with the fact that at the time that I started, having spoken to these guys at work who've done it and they've gone through the Sydney boom and all the great stuff in the western suburbs that sort of propelled them forward, I've just come in at the time when interest rates are starting to go back up, the banks are tightening the lending, it's all getting a little bit more and more interesting. So,
markets are always different, and I was fortunate to get a period of time in that Sydney market as it boomed through the western suburbs of Sydney, and speak a lot about it on the show. Fortunate, but timing is one thing. Good advice, good strategy is another thing. And are we going to see that again at any point in time? I don't know. I'm spending. I've been investing a fair bit up in Brizzy. I imagine you've been up there as well. But let's have a chat about that. What sort of assets are you buying?
So at the moment, I've got 4 properties. They're all 3-bedroom houses, and they're all in Logan. And I was hoping to diversify a little bit more than that, but at the same time, that seems to be where the action is right now.
Okay.
All 4 purchases were pretty good. Managed to get them rented out pretty quickly, except for one I had to do a bit of work to get it up to scratch. But rental yields are not too bad. I think I get the impression Logan's slowing down a little bit in terms of the rental yield, but for the next ones, I've got some plans in 2018 to do some more. I'm going to try and diversify beyond that, but right now they're all in the Logan area. So I got one in Waterford West, one in Eagleby, one in Crestmead, one in Slacks Creek.
Okay.
The one in Slacks Creek was an interesting one. It came along very rapidly because one of the colleagues at work that inspired me to get into this actually also works with Victor, and he owns the property next door.
Okay.
So when this one came up, they offered it to him, but he wasn't in a position to buy at the time. So he said to Victor, give it to someone I know. So they offered it to me, and I was sort of almost not quite financially ready, but I just jumped in, and there we are.
Well, maybe you can stick them together at some point and do something with it. But
that's the plan.
You never know your luck.
Yeah.
That's cool. So how much time do you spend working on your property investment portfolio now? Is it quite a full-on thing, or is it a...
It was at first. The first property came in March, then the next one in May, and then 2 in June. So those are the dates they settled. So between March and probably August, it felt like I had a second job. I was going home at night and doing hours worth of stuff. But right now, it's not a lot. It's maybe half an hour a week. Once a month, the statement comes in. I'll plug the numbers into the spreadsheet that I've spent 6 months perfecting, and it doesn't take a lot of time at all.
And married, kids, all this sort of
Married
stuff?
with 3 kids.
Yeah. And your wife, is she sort of side by side with you and in head in the books and in the numbers, or is she like, that sounds cool, go for it? She's
supportive, and she understands the strategy. It took me a little bit to convince her. I took her out to one of Steve and Victor's seminars out at the Ridges there, and it was good actually. The first one of 2017, and they were actually replaying the overall strategy, which I'd just been through, and it just clicked with her in exactly the same way that it did with me. She went, that makes sense. They were showcasing some of the success stories of some of their clients who've got 18, 19 properties in less than a decade, and she just came out of it going, wow. Yeah. So she's fully on board, but I'm doing the work.
You're doing the work.
Yeah.
And as a couple, as a sort of collective unit, you must be quite satisfied that you've been able to take so much action in a space of less than a year, from sort of a year prior to where you are today. It's very different circumstances.
Yeah, it's good. It's exciting, and I spoke before about how I was doing lots of work when those first 4 properties were getting bedded in, and now it's a bit quiet. I'm getting the itch. I need to get another one.
You want to go again?
Yeah.
How's you sort of, you touched on it beforehand, lending's getting a little bit more difficult these days. So, do you still have more capacity to borrow? Is that going to be a problem, or when will that become a problem?
I've got another property that's in the works, ready to go soon. So I've been having the pre-approval conversations, and the answer to your question is yes, but not with the major lenders.
Okay.
The major lenders look at my serviceability very differently. And in fact, it's almost a joke the way they do it, I think, because they look at loans that I'm paying 5% interest only, and they assess those at 7.5 principal and interest, and they just go, no more for you. But there's other lenders like Peppers that will happily lend me some money. So,
and you say you work for a bank. Did you finance through that bank? Did you get any special deals as staff?
Some discount on interest rates, although that seems to just get it back down to what's a normal interest rate, because I think they're charging more than the others. LMI is discounted with the bank, so that worked well. Okay. And I've got 3 of the properties that would have cost me LMI, LVR of 90 on 2 of them and 88 on one of them. Okay. I would have had an LVR of 90 on the 4th one, except that they didn't like that postcode at the time, so they said no.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So you've been these LMI discounts. So we're talking about lenders' mortgage insurance. So if you finance over 80%, you got to pay lenders' mortgage insurance, which ensures the lender that should you default, that they can potentially get some money back. So so that's pretty cool. So as a staff incentive, your employer gives you a discount on LMI.
Yeah, so that wasn't too bad, but I'm maxed out now with them. So I'm looking at, and even talking with the mortgage broker, the other major banks seem to have the same sort of lending policies at the moment. So it looks like the next 1 or 2 properties will be with a smaller lender. Yeah,
and that's a good strategy. Diversifying lender base, and different lenders have different serviceability requirements and different ways they view stuff, as you mentioned. So it's good to be able to know there's other alternatives out there. But all investors at some point in time will be sort of tapped on the shoulder and say, no more for you for a little while. But lending policies change all the times, and banks are businesses, and banks like lending money, so they've got certain rules and requirements they need to operate within because of APRA lending guidelines. But you never know what might happen next year. They might go even tighter. They might loosen a little bit. And I've had a mortgage broker on the podcast quite recently, sort of hinting that maybe he's seen a slight sort of lessening in some of these policies. But we'll see how we go next year with all that sort of stuff.
I need to keep reminding myself. I've only been doing this for about 9 months.
I know.
I haven't seen the cycles and all of those sort
of things. No. And lending is a headache, right? It's a loan is you don't want a mortgage. I don't want mortgages, but I need one in order to purchase property. So just try and be fluid with financing and think about how you can think of alternatives. But no, that sounds really cool. What's outside of the wealth creation perspective, the end goal, why do you like investing in property? Is there anything else that you get a buzz out of?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I didn't think I would. I didn't go into it thinking this would be fun or this would be interesting. I just thought I need to do this to create some wealth. But it has been fun. It's actually been really interesting. I love the learning aspect of it. I love listening to this podcast, and there's a couple of other podcasts. Yes, and the thing that's really good for me about that is that people are saying the same things that all make sense. They talk about the fundamentals, and they talk about the strategy, and they talk about cash flow, and they're saying, even phrases like markets within markets. I just hear it so often. It's almost like there's this tight group of people that are property investors, and that's just the language they speak. So it all feels like I'm doing the right things. What I need to keep reminding myself of is that I'm not an expert. I'm not experienced at this, and I need to have the right people around me. And I've connected with people like Munzerl, who I sort of found my way to through Victor and through
as your accountant.
This podcast.
This is my accountant as well. There you go. Yeah.
Ross Lachlan is now
broker.
Broker. Yeah. So I hear these names and I go, okay, well, I'll talk to these people. They obviously know what they're doing. But I've apart from anything else, I've got to really watch the cash flow situation. I've got to remember that I've got a family to feed, and I've still got other bills to pay, and I've got to keep working to sustain this. So the excitement to go that fast has got to be tempered with a little bit of caution.
Oh yeah, four properties in less than a year it's pretty ambitious. It's all in, right? Yep. You haven't done a tax return yet, have you? You would have done your first one. So I guess 2 properties or so. A lot of people make the mistake of investing in property for a tax minimisation strategy, and you hear all the time. You go, negative gearing is not a strategy, it's an outcome. But I guess someone like yourself, who is a salaried employee, there would be benefits when it comes to negative gearing at a point in time you do your tax return. So imagine that's an upside benefit, but it's not the reason why you're doing this.
Definitely not the reason. And one of the first things that Victor impressed upon me was that you do not factor that in when you do the sums. Yeah. And lo and behold, a couple of months later, the federal government made a couple of interesting tweaks to the tax return situation there, and who knows where that could lead. So I'm definitely not including that in the equation, but it's a bonus. And,
it is a bonus.
I don't know what that'll look like next year. The tax return this year probably wasn't a good indication because there was only a couple of months and a few expenses, but I guess it all helps.
So is the portfolio before tax, where does it hover, sort of, is it negative? Is it really
It's
negative?
negative.
Yeah.
The rental yields, I think, are good. So if you compared the rental yields with a Sydney or a Melbourne, they're definitely better in Brisbane. But I've got to chip in a fair bit. But that was one of the things that I looked at before I got into it was, I've got a little bit of surplus income, and I'm one of those people that I'm sensible with my savings if I've got a specific goal to save towards. Otherwise, I'll just spend everything I've got. And, that's fine. We're comfortable. But I thought, okay, if I can set myself up in property and I can sustain a little bit of negative gearing, I'm probably at the point now where I can't take too much more without a lifestyle hit.
Yeah.
And that's challenging as well, because one of the things I wanted to do was to try and put a granny flat on one of them to neutralise the cash flow. And, of course, you need to borrow that money from the same lender that the main property is on. And they've said no.
Okay.
So in order to put the granny flat on that property, I'm probably going to have to refi that with another institution.
Okay,
So,
and pull some money out and top up the loan, yeah. So there's quite a lot of moving parts there. So how many properties next year do you reckon? What do you think sort of reasonable? And talk about numbers of properties, and you shouldn't be talking about numbers of properties, talk about value of properties, but, let's talk tangible things.
So I've started doing a plan for next year. And there's a couple of things that are going to happen next year which will help. And I'll say this with the assumption that I can get finance. I actually don't know if I can. Yeah. One is that I'm going to convert my superannuation into a self-managed super fund.
Okay.
And I think there's enough in there, depending on the value of the property, to get at least 2.
Okay.
Maybe 3 if they're small type property value. But 2 is enough. So 2 there. Probably another, maybe up to 3 more. So potentially 5 next year, all subject to whether I can get the finance, right? So.
Yeah. And you have enough fat, i.e. surplus cash every single month to service. So you would know what number you have, as in, this is what I can tip into a property portfolio every single month without really impacting your lifestyle too much.
I do know roughly what that is, and there's a little bit of buffer there, because one of the things I've taught myself to do over the years is, I know, for example, I'm going to take the family on a nice holiday every year to Fiji or to Bali or something like that. Typically what people do is that they'll go on that holiday and then pay it off.
Yeah.
I don't like to do that. I know I'm going to have that holiday, so I actually like to skim some salary off and pile up the savings. So I've been doing that for a long time. Good. And even things like, I'm going to get a new iPhone every 2 years. I'm going to get a new computer every 4 years. I know they're known expenses and I can plan for them. So there's some buffer in there with the cash flow that I could potentially work with. But the other challenge for me is that these properties that I've got, even though they're reasonably settled in now, I don't think they've quite reached equilibrium. There's all of those sort of fluctuating costs, like you get the vacancy at the start, you've got some repairs. So I don't quite know where the cash flow for them is yet.
Yeah.
So I need to just let that stabilise for a while, and then I can know how much further I can go. But the properties next year, I think, need to be probably a little bit closer to neutral. The ones that I've got are really growth assets, and so.
But you're establishing portfolio right now. This is an acquisition phase. You're looking to accumulate the assets, so then you can, at a point in time, say stop.
Yep.
And then time should sort itself out. As long as you're buying properties that are going up in value, that's the key thing.
And one of the things that I've learned from listening to this podcast, I've heard it so many times, you often ask people, if you could go back in time to your younger self, what would you tell yourself? And the number of times that I hear the person say, buy more earlier, it's so I'm really trying to just go as hard as I can.
Yeah, it's the benefit of hindsight's a beautiful thing. I think back on my portfolio, and I could have bought a lot more when I did, but maybe something would have happened. So, if your biggest regret is not doing enough of something, it's not a bad thing. If your biggest regret is, I wish I didn't buy that because it's absolutely crippled me, that's a bad one. So, it's a nice thing to have, but you're not messing around. That's not a bad way. How are you managing these properties? You just got them with a property manager?
Yeah, they're all because they're close enough together, they're all with the one property manager right now. I've been through a couple of other property managers on the way to that were not really doing what I needed them to do.
Yeah.
So, and I learnt fairly quickly that you don't mess around with that. If they're not up to scratch, you just boot them, and found a good one. So that's working out well.
Yeah. And you mentioned you sort of listen to this podcast and some other ones. Why do you sort of do that? Is there any Do you just like hearing the stories, or what do you take out of these type of
I
things?
like hearing the stories, but it's education. You know,
Yeah.
every so often I'll just hear an interesting new thing that I didn't know, which is probably important to know. I went out to a few of the seminars that Steve and Victor put on and just listen to the stories there and just pick up tips. And for me, it's all about building the experience and learning how other people have done things. I like hearing the stories when people have made mistakes. I think that's a really valuable thing to listen to.
A lot of people try and cover up their mistakes, though. You know, did you ever listen to, say, this podcast or anything else and just go, oh, that sounds a bit like bull crap? That sounds, I don't really believe it too much. Or you reckon most people are pretty straight up and down when it comes to? We try and sort of filter people onto the show, so they tell their stories.
Most people seem genuine. The classic mistake that I hear everyone talking about is buying off the plan.
Yeah.
It's everyone. I haven't heard a single buy off the plan story that's anything other than disastrous, to be honest. So things like that are valuable. The challenge that I've got to work with is that I've not got a lot of time before that sort of retirement finish line that I want to work to.
Yeah.
And I can't really afford in that short time frame to make any big mistakes because I won't have the time to recover from them. So.
Yeah, but you can mitigate a lot of those by good education, right? And if you see something coming, hopefully you don't make the wrong decisions, and therefore you don't end up with mistakes. But that's the idea.
Yeah.
You said you were in IT, right?
Yeah.
IT. You've always been an IT man?
Yeah, pretty much.
Do you think that sort of has shaped the way in which you invest in property? And I say this on the basis of, I chat to different investors from all different walks of life, and, engineers are wired a particular way, salespeople are wired a particular way. And I know we've got a lot of IT tech people in our business and they're wired a particular way.
Right.
Do you think in property the same way you might be sort of thinking about lines of code or, workflow stuff through, you know what I mean? Like, are you a very linear type of investor, or are you sort of, like, if I looked up inside your head, would just see this complicated web of things going all over the joint?
I have no idea what you'd find inside my head, Phil. I'm a very logical kind of thinker. Very structured sort of thinker, and I've poured my heart and soul into a spreadsheet to help me manage these properties, and I think it's actually really useful. But I also recognise that spreadsheet would probably send anyone else who tried to use it somewhat insane because it's very complicated. But I don't think it's affected my investment strategy, because my investment strategy is somewhat guided by other people. As I said, I've literally been kicked into this with the inspiration of a couple of guys. I heard them talking one day about their property, and I said, I've got to find out what's going on here. So for the price of a couple of beers, they told me how it worked for them. I thought that makes sense. I spoke to Victor. Victor talked me through it. It made even more sense. And so I'm just kind of being guided there. It's obviously my decision at the end of the day. Victor's not, sort of holding my hand and making decisions for me, but I'm getting that guidance on what makes sense. I'm getting the education from talking to people around me and listening to podcasts and things like that. So it's help. I guess the logical mindset has helped me work through how I'll use the expertise of others to get through this. But there's a lot that I can't see. I can't see my way through to that ultimate end state where the wealth is coming in. I get the strategy and I get the steps that you take to get there. But right now, with the negative cash flow, the sort of stale rental market and the lending restrictions, I'm looking at this going, I can't see how this is going to take off. And I know that it will. I need to just kind of have some faith in the process and the markets. But
it's a reasonably healthy way to look at it. And to your point around, you just don't, what your buyer's agents say, you just don't do everything he tells you. You still challenge that. And I think that's a really important way to do it. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking, yes, I want to invest in property. Yes, I'm going to pay the experts, and I'm not going to take any responsibility in my decisions because they're going to make all the decision. If you go down that path, you're going to end yourself up in a bit of trouble. And if someone says you a buyer's agent, you don't have to worry about just do exactly everything I say. I'd probably put a red flag up. And I know the guys over Right Property Group and know them well, and some other very good buyer's agents will say the same thing. They'll say, I expect you to challenge me on when I put properties in front of you. They want to be asked the questions.
Yep.
Why, how, who, when, where, what are we going to do with it? What's the long-term play? What's the upside play? You need to be asking these questions. So you've got the right attitude with it. You can't outsource responsibility.
It's ultimately my money and my responsibility.
Yeah. And, you've got to choose your advisors, right? And you'd hope they've got their best interests at heart, your best interests at heart, but not all advice is created equal. So be careful.
Most people I come across are actually really
pretty good,
genuine and generous with their advice, and they're willing to share their stories and talk about their mistakes. So I think that's good.
It's good, Lachlan. So in a year's time, when you're back on the show, what are you going to tell me?
Hopefully I'm telling you that I've got another 4 or 5 under the belt and the cash flow is still manageable and it's okay, and planning for maybe the next 4 or 5 after that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, put the pedal down. Seems to be working for you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's a good one. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au if you aren't yet subscribing to our daily morning market intelligence newsletter. Please do be the first to know what's going on. smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe. Put your email address in there and we'll make sure we get you on the list. If you'd like to get your info from social media, search Smart Property HQ. You'll track us down. And any questions for me, for Lachlan, or anything we're chatting about on the podcast today, you can email the team editor at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. And if you want to come on the show, email that same email. Lachlan's pretty good, isn't it? It's not too daunting coming on here.
Not daunting.
No, good. All right, there we go. Got an advocate here. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.